Old people, do you love them? Are you scared of them? Do you look down on them? Just what's going on with that? Never before in the history that I'm aware of do we have as many elderly people that are hanging on to their cognitive abilities. It's alarming. And why do I say that? Because we've figured out how to sustain life, prolong life, to help people get into their late 70s, through their 80s, and into their 90s. And I've watched several of these people find themselves in this really amazing period of their lifetime, which, 200 years ago, people were living to be 35, 40 years of age and passing because of disease, and the natural lifespan was pretty short. I may be off a little bit there, but it's dramatically longer now. So we sustained it. And obviously we have a lot of problems here in the United States with helping the elderly cope with those later years. I mean, we're seeing a lot of communities being built for people that have some affluence. And I've witnessed some people with a lot of money, with a little bit of money, and then in between have different levels of dignity in those last years. But that's not really what I wanted to talk about today. I just point that out for your consideration, comment, and that was my observation some time ago in the remarkable times that we're in. But the real thing that I wanted to speak about today was around the insights that are available from a generation that I'd have to say is probably 50 years of age to people in their 90s, especially the people, I think that are in their 50s and still speaking to maybe their parents or grandparents, who are in their 80s and 90s. And I think it's a fascinating time because never before have we had such, have had a generation that had seen so much dramatic change due to technology and the advances that we've made in medicine, advances, or, the stories, are kind of crazy. You can look at what we were telling people to do, the doctors were telling people to do in the 70s and 80s, and you look at what they're telling them to do now, and a lot of it's diametrically opposed. So you wonder, who really knows, what's best. But nonetheless, those people that are in their 80s and 90s in particular have seen dramatic changes in our lifestyle and in the kind of the rules of conduct in society. I mean, we're watching the youngest generation right now totally revamping all of the rules around connecting with each other. They're creating their own language through social media where they don't even punctuate or capitalize for any of the same reasons that, people did when they wrote, just 20 years ago. So I think there's a dramatic set of changes that are going on right now. And I think the insights that those people who are in their 70s and 80s and 90s, have into life, into our humanity, and the things that, they're not necessarily beholden to the they're near the end of their life, and a lot of times people let go of a lot of the things that were keeping them from being totally honest with themselves and honest with others toward the end. And I think that's going to be a fascinating thing for some of you to reach out and talk to people in their 70s, 80s, and 90s and ask them, what is so dramatically different today than there was when you were growing up? I mean, if you were growing up in the 40s, for example, or the 50s, wow. I mean, the limitations that you had in your ability to know what was going on in the world, to know what was going on just in neighboring cities, was so limited. And now with the advances past, the radio and the TV, which were, the only, and newspaper, which were the primary means of getting information from one community to the next back in that era, today we have instant access to information from all over the world. And yet, we're still dealing with a lot of the same issues that we were dealing with back then. So if you've been watching some of my videos, it's about transparency. And I think the transparency, actually the viewpoint that those people in their late years of life have to offer are very powerful and very insightful. And, I'm in between that era of, that generation that I still have my hands into the technology and, like to associate with people in those 20s and 30s, as well as people that are in their 70s and into their 90s, and notice the contrast between the two perspectives. So I'd encourage you to examine that yourself and come up with some of your own observations and conclusions, if that so strikes your interest, because that's where this really starts. I'm Mark Roach. All the best.